Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Naomi.
It's so good to see you. So I would like to introduce my good friend, MichelleRemond. And Michelle was a colleague of mine when I worked at Redwood City School District. In fact, I was on the hiring team and had the privilege of selecting Michelle to serve in a new position that we created called community liaison. And Michelle was hired to especially reach out to our Spanish speaking community. As it turned out, Michelle has taken on many, many more roles than that because she's very talented. Michelle, can you just tell us a little bit about your job at Redwood City School District?
Absolutely. And I want to thank you, Naomi, and the church for inviting me to this talk. So I work for the Redwood City School District at the communications department. And I basically oversee their communication in Spanish. However, it's not a language part, but an engagement part. So honoring the cultural sensitivity of what we want to convey means knowing who our target audience is. And not only what they expect from the school, but also what is their sense of self. And that has become a huge part of my job because I'm sort of a bridge between the schools, the parents, the district, the cabinet members, the directors, to help them understand what's being a Latino parent like, what's being that on a public school system in the United States, and what being an immigrant is. So it has many layers and has a lot of implications from trying to navigate both systems, the ones that we have as our reference from our countries, to the actual system. And also in this day and time with the political climate there is, what is being an immigrant like, and what are the role of the school and the teachers in making parents feel welcome and safe.
And Michelle, you're an immigrant yourself. I know that you recently became a US citizen because I was lucky enough to attend the naturalization ceremony. But can you just briefly tell us about your own immigrant story of coming to the US?
Sure. So 10 years ago, my then husband was transferred to the headquarters here in the Bay Area for his company. And he all of a sudden told me, hey, I have this invitation. Would you like, us to move? And I said, yeah, it's a great opportunity. Although we had a fairly good life in Mexico City. The constant violence and the threat, of kidnapping and mugging, it's always there. So, and I had two little girls at the time, 5 and 7. So when I told my parents that we were to come, they were very mad because in some part of the mindset of the Latino culture, daughters are expected to stay where the parents are, while sons are able, to go. But I decided to team up with my husband and then come. And it was interesting because within 4 months we had to move, pack everything, and it was a one-way ticket with a promise of help with a green card and a lot of services in place for us. So I was a teacher in Mexico. I was an 8th grade history teacher, and I also taught sociology in college. So, education was my life. I was also a mom. So when we came here, even though I had the language, and I myself have a master's degree, and we had all those services in place for us, it was very, very hard. My daughters were placed as English learners because that's the way it is. I knew no one. We were, by ourselves here. And one of the biggest shocks was that all my credentials and all my studies were not valid by default because I came from a third world country. And so at first, one of my first jobs here was as a Spanish teacher, and I had to sweep the classroom as well. And I was expected, to put the diapers of the kids and clean up. And I didn't mind because I love Spanish, but it was interesting. And also was interesting because when I shared with my husband then what I was going through, he said like, no, because he was on a headquarters position, he was on a very good position. So he couldn't understand what I was going through because I had huge loss of career. So what was very interesting is that I finally understood that I had to go through some evaluation and such. And when I went through that, it took me 6 years because I was focusing on having my daughters, thrive. I now remember that I spent 2 years at my home without talking to anyone, just the teacher when I picked the girls up. I didn't have any friends. I didn't have anyone else to relate to. It was just enclosed, which is very normal for an immigrant. It's one of the stages. And then I sent my papers to be evaluated. And it just happens that a week later, the position in the Redwood City School District was open. So we were, like two parallel lines that in some point they miraculously close. They cross. And when I was there in the interview with you, I just couldn't believe that my skills could be useful, because I've heard in the past 6 years that I had nothing to offer here because I was an immigrant. So that's my story. And then I thought one day, if this is what it feels like, knowing the language, having the resources, not being in survival mode, and I thought I was going to die of, sadness, what it would be like to have 90% less than that. And that's how I chose to focus my career at the district, to give back. And that's the trademark of whoever works with me knows that's my standard.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you a question now that is not on this list that occurred to me.
Mm-hmm.
So Michelle, in hearing you talk about that, it makes me think that there are some parallels between what we are going through right now with the self-isolation and the isolation of being an immigrant. Do you see parallels with that?
Absolutely. The parallels I see have to do with a loss of sense of self. That means that we get our sense of who we are from what we do and who we relate to. And if we are cut from what we do and we're cut to who we relate to, then you not only is just like a place to wait, but you don't know what's happening outside and inside. That's what being an immigrant is like. So, for example, you could look around and say, I cannot see my loved ones. Well, imagine that for 10 or 20 years, not being able to celebrate the birthdays, or imagine Thanksgiving would come right now. And you will have to stay at your home and just, you will be grateful you have, 2 or 3 people with you, but that will be it. Or Christmas, right? Or imagine, in the case if someone would not have documents, not being able to fly to other countries, just as the same right now, or to go to other parts of the world. So I think that I'm taking the quarantine very, very, calmly, because I've been through this for so many years, right? But it is mostly a place of loss.
Mm-hmm. Great. So it's an opportunity for all of us to develop some empathy. So moving to Redwood City, I know you've been working round the clock practically on helping families who are going through some trauma because of COVID-19. And we can probably all imagine, but I wonder if you can describe what are some of the hardships that families in Redwood City are experiencing because of this pandemic?
One of the hardships is definitely how unstable their job situation is, because in some families, neither parents are working right now. And I served yesterday 3 families who texted me and say, we ran out of our savings, so we have basically nothing, right? Like they were able to survive 3 or 4 weeks, but they're done. And so I see it in like the everyday life that can actually be solved, because the city has a lot of services for those families. We have food distribution. We have the Fair Oaks Community Center is doing a lot of support, from assistance with rent or other expenses. And also we have the lunch distribution for minors and such. But it's also the system-wise. I think that is the biggest challenge. Parents are overwhelmed in so many ways. One of the layers is the at-home learning, which we have put in place, and it's awesome. I myself have, seen it because I have to walk parents through it. But having a parent who has a third grade or second grade literacy level, having to go with her child through Google Classroom, and Zoom meetings and everything, parents feel like this is too much. And when a parent feels inadequate, they don't feel as parents. They feel like children. And then sometimes the child takes the role of the parent, or the child himself disconnects, right? And so right now the struggle is how to make parents feel that they are able, they can do this, right? So my job with them is with a phone or a screencastify, say, you can do this, you are able. And another part that has a deeper layer, it has to do with the compassion you were mentioning, is that parents being amazed that someone cares. When the teacher tells me, I have a child missing, I have 30 students, but one is missing, my class is not complete, could you please reach out to that family? And I, reach out and text and say, Señora, please come, we can do this. And they are, with the phone, and then the child appears in the screen, and the whole classroom is so happy, and the teacher said, we missed you. The moms have told me several times, I didn't know we matter. I didn't know the school would go so far for a child that's missing. So please imagine feeling that your absence is not worth the attention of others. Happening that in San Carlos, happening here in Redwood City. And when we say of course you're worth the help. And a very interesting part of the Latino culture is when families feel, well, this is part of the courtesy or the manners of Latino culture. When the parents feel that they have been helped in a way that shows their worth, they don't say thank you or just thank you. They bless you back. So that's awesome. And I always think that is my standard of quality when I interact with them. Until I get the blessing, then I keep going. Because it's not just saying, give me, because I don't have anything. They take and they give. And that's an empowered parent. That is a part of the community. So the challenge is the families who are doubled up. And I can tell you, we have families that are 17 in a room, in a 2-bedroom apartment. We have families who are, let's say, 6 men and 1 middle school girl in a room. Those that are families, those are the communities there, to have them on board consistently, not just once, but consistently. Right now, the challenge is for them I think they have passed the first bump, the emergency, this is where we're at. And then how long are we going to be like this? Which is a question we all share. How long is this going to take? Mm-hmm. And then I think that their despair takes is different to the despair of someone who has not to worry about rent, or they will cope because they're very resilient. But we don't know how coping would look like in this pandemic.
Great. Is there any single story that you might be able to tell us that would shed some light on, just sort of the personal and human side of this?
Yes, absolutely. I have one story that has caught my eye. So this, and please keep in mind that we have a lot of families that have come from the detention center. So where their crossing has been, you know, as it happens sometimes, it has a irregular in the sense that they have gone through some illegal ways to come here, which is an open conversation that we have. And it's none of our business to ask about that. Sometimes they do share, and I listen to their stories. So this mom has had a year and a half ago a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old, and they crossed the border. And while they were crossing in the river, the 5-year-old loses her grip, and it's caught by the water, and it's about to drown when she sees the police coming. So she holds on the other one, and she tries to grab the kid who's slipping away, and she picks him back, and the child is already, you know, coughing and everything. She sees the police, they run. She's absolutely sure she will be shot. Absolutely sure. So they cross the border. They finally, you know, turn themselves in. So the child is still processing, all, you know, all what they went through. They're in the detention centers. They're there 2 weeks, and then they arrive at one of our schools, right? And the teacher told me in February, there's something with this kid. Something is happening. So my job was to ask and screen for trauma, and the mom tells me this story. So that was in February. Imagine March, going to the at-home learning, right? So the mom was, both teachers, kindergarten and preschool and kindergarten, were saying, like, I need to talk to this parent. How are they dealing with it? So one of the teachers was able to drop off the packet in their footstep, and the other one we were able, you know, to make the arrangements for a Google Meet. And having those children, seeing them singing, seeing them, you know, learning as a regular child, a newcomer who would come and learn English. They are so young, so they are getting everything, right? Knowing that a year and a half ago, they were almost drowning and they weren't, you know, through all of this. They still have that with them. But being able to provide the services and having this teacher paying attention and say something, instead of saying something's wrong, she didn't say something wrong. She said, what happened to them? That makes the difference. That is one of the biggest approach. What has happened to them? And also learning their story. And I think if I have something to say to you who is listening, do not assume anything about immigrants. Being educated or knowing a lot of things may make you think that you already know. My biggest invitation would be, do not assume. Because if you assume, then you take the importance and the core element of having them tell their story. And that's where the sense of self comes from, for being able to say who you are. But if someone tells you, I know who you are. So it is very different if someone would have told me that story, that if the mom told me her story, right? And if she said, this is what I went through, and this is my child going to school. That's how she will start to heal and to belong. So compassion works very well when we see all of us trying to find where our story is, instead of saying, I know your story, because otherwise that is, I think you just get it in a very superficial way, although you may care a lot. But it's in a deeper level where we can all learn and connect from a deeper place.
So the needs are many right now, and there are so many ways that we might help. But I just wonder if you have any advice for those of us who are not suffering quite as much. How can we reach out and help somebody who maybe only lives a few miles away and is in a really different situation?
Yes, so the needs, I agree with you, are a lot. I think that housing is one of them. So anything that we can push the authorities, around us to make sure it's very clear what the importance of social responsibility that we have, that we make sure the families that are at risk of losing their homes do not, right? Because landlords have a responsibility. So if you rent a property, do not raise the rent. And if you know someone who may be, doing so, stop them, because that is not okay. We have a lot of families, more than, let me see, we have almost 1,000 families who are doubled up, maybe more. That's also considered homeless by the Department of Education. So not to mention the ones who are living, in motels and the shelters and everything. So being doubled up means that you're living in someone else's living room. And that is you're 1 inch to be homeless. So that is important. The other part has to do with tap into what you're feeling right now. This feeling of not knowing what's going to happen, of being isolated, of sensing that you lost something so big that you cannot name it. That is the permanent feeling of an immigrant, at least for a certain time. If you don't thrive, if you don't build new meanings, which is a healthy way to go ahead, you could be stuck in this feeling for decades. And that's terrible. Do you think this would be the best self you could have? Imagine someone right now looking down on you saying, hey, you're not working hard enough. You're not being productive enough. Imagine that, how you feel, that should within you, but it's the same. You're being, expecting something that you just cannot give. You're in a different place. So another thing that you could do, definitely, you could donate, if you want to make donations, to certain organizations that are collecting, I can share with you some of the links that weekly need diapers, food, clothing, but also all kinds of gift cards from restaurants, takeout, gas, the everyday life, not having, dish soap, toiletries, all of that bring dignity to the family, right? So those kind of donations are very, very important. And I think also the other part is being flexible. Right now, the invitation for being flexible, what does work look like? What those education look like? Instead of saying it should work like this, because if you who are educated and who have, full command of the language, full command of the citizenship, if this is your frustration, an immigrant will take all of this to go to the level you're proposing, right? So if you're flexible, then we can all meet, we can all grow. Otherwise, there will be always two understandings of the world. The one you are expecting to happen, and the one who just can't just cope, right? So by being flexible, we are creating new meanings. And I think that will be the true compassion and justice that could bring the best of us in this time.
Thanks so much, Michelle. Your words have really uplifted my day-to-day, and I hope that the rest of our congregation will feel the same. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
And we'll stay in touch with you about any ways that we can help as well.
Absolutely. And feel free to reach out, and I'll be glad to help as I can.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.